Project negotiations. Negotiation is an invaluable skill for any project leader, not only to negotiate agreements with donors, vendors, and consultants, but to effectively negotiate with the stakeholders, beneficiaries, and team members throughout the life of the project. Negotiation is defined as the discussion between two or more parties aimed at reaching an agreement, and it's an important skill the project leader needs to master. A project leader will need to negotiate for a variety of reasons and with different stakeholders who are looking out for the best deals they can get. One true measure of a good project leader is the ability to negotiate effectively by arriving at an agreement which all parties regard as satisfactory. The very nature of the project makes negotiation a critical skill for the project leader. Limited resources, critical constraints of schedule, scope, budget, and quality make negotiations a constant feature in the work of a project leader. For example, your project needs to develop a critical activity and needs the support from the organization's communication expert. But the director that controls the resource has received a similar request from another project. As a project leader, you will need to use your negotiation skills to come to an agreement that will satisfy all parties. Project negotiations can take place at any time in a project and may be either formal or informal. In formal negotiations, there is a formal authority given to the project leader to represent the project and the organization on negotiations with third parties. It requires some careful planning and a series of meetings before a contract or agreement is signed to formalize the negotiation. Informal negotiations occur all the time and include negotiation with team members and internal stakeholders on the use of resources, priorities, and approaches to implement the project. It doesn't require a careful planning process or a signed contract. Most of the agreement is verbal. As a project leader, you will be involved in negotiations with many internal stakeholders, supervisors and senior managers, project directors, the steering committee, administrative managers, and even with the project team. Most of these negotiations are on approvals and changes to internal project documents, negotiation for administrative support, negotiating the assignment of resources to your project, and negotiating with the team on approaches and resolving conflicts. Some of these negotiations will be more informal in nature. Negotiating with external stakeholders requires a different approach. You will be negotiating with the donors on changes to the project plans, negotiating with project partners on how to implement the project, negotiating with vendors and consultants to get the best value for the project, and even negotiating with government officials or other local organizations who have an interest in your project. Most of these negotiations will require formal agreements and changes to contracts. There are two types of project negotiations: distributive or competitive negotiation and integrative or collaborative negotiation. Distributive negotiation means obtaining the best deal regardless of the needs and interests of the other party. This type of negotiation can become aggressive with a focus on a win-lose scenario. Integrative negotiation seeks to achieve a win-win scenario where all parties involved get part or all of what they were looking for from the negotiation. This type of negotiation tends to produce the best results, builds long-term relationships, and minimizes the opportunities for conflict. In distributed negotiations or competitive negotiations, the approach is to treat the process as a competition that is to be won or lost. Competitive negotiations may be known as positional or hard bargaining negotiations. The basic assumption of competitive negotiation is that it is a zero-sum game. That is, the people involved believe that there is a fixed amount to be gained which both people desire. And if one person gains, then the other person loses. It's like arguing over a piece of pie. If one person gets a piece of the pie, then the other person does not. In integrative negotiations, also called collaborative, principle, or interest-based negotiation, the approach is to treat the relationship as an important and valuable element while seeking a just and fair agreement. In integrative negotiations, it is assumed that the pie can be enlarged by finding things of value to both parties, thus creating a win-win situation where both parties can leave the table feeling that they have gained something of value. These are some of the typical areas that a project leader will have to negotiate. Prices of goods and services with vendors and consultants, negotiating the resolution of team conflicts, negotiating requests for changes in the project plans, especially the core plans dealing with the project constraints, negotiating partnership with internal or external stakeholders, negotiating the collaboration and support to the project, negotiating resources for the project, such as additional funds and people, and participation, especially from project beneficiaries. Culture has a significant influence on how people negotiate. People from one country will have a different goal, attitudes, and styles than people from another country. The difference can even be seen in people from different cultures that live in the same country. These differences are important to consider at the moment of starting a negotiation. The project leader needs to be aware about the cultural factors that can affect the negotiation process. There are about 10 factors that create cultural differences in negotiations. The goal of the negotiation can be either to reach a contract agreement or the focus is to build a long relationship. Attitude to the negotiation, to win, lose, or to win-win. The personal style can be formal or informal. The communication can be direct or indirect. Time sensitivity can be high or low. For example, a person might prefer a slow negotiation process. Other cultural factors include the level of emotions during the negotiations from high to low, the type of agreement is specific with all the details or a more general form, the approach to the negotiation from bottom up or from top to down, for example, to agree on the general principle and then work out the details, how the team in the negotiation is organized, one leader that makes all decisions or a group where there must be a consensus, and finally, the level of risk taken from high to low. It's important for the project leader to understand these differences and then accommodate his or her style to the situation to help improve the communications and expectations about the negotiation process.